what was easy about this project was having this structure, like a script to
Okay.
follow, which is why I feel like if you want to start out with animating something but you don't know, like music videos or lyric videos are a great starting point because you already have words and you have the sentences, and then you're just thinking about animating. If you have to come up with like a narrative of your own, I think it just adds a lot of extra time. I'm Mansa. I'm in the grad program here at MICA. I'm doing GDMFA. So yeah, this is just like some of my work from undergrad, some projects from MICA, and just my general interest in motion. This was actually part of a class assignment, but it was a cool opportunity. We had to make like a promotional animation for the North Sea Jazz Festival in Rotterdam, which is a town in Netherlands. I came up with a storyboard, picked some music, and then animated it, and then there was the display. So music was not a part of the brief, but since it's a jazz festival, I thought animating something to music could be cool and a good starting point. I think a few things to consider were that people were going to look at this when they were passing in the car. Like if you see the road over here, so it's something that needs to be kind of large in scale and not have many tiny elements because it's going to be blown up and be projected on the screen. So this was like the storyboard that I came up with. It's just a simple idea of like a trumpet and drums and piano and all things jazz that I could think of, and just like thinking about how the transitions would happen. And this is the final motion piece. So yeah, this was back in 2019, and I thought that this could be interesting to show because this was the template that we were given. Um, the one on the left is the mask, where we had to export the After Effects file, like I've done on the right, and add these extra panels. That's not something I knew initially, so I had to kind of extend the animation to have like more of the screen in my video. Um, and yeah, this is how it looks to scale. As you can see, the people are kind of tiny. So I feel like this is the first time I saw my work in that big of a scale, and it was kind of intimidating, but also cool. And then you notice that the smallest of things can scale up, so you need to be like really precise with how you export things. Um, but yeah, and they picked like a few of these videos to play at the festival as a promo, and yeah, it was, I wasn't around to see that, but yeah, I think it was a fun project. um, this is, I think I just included this to talk about how you can extend like a single piece of animation. Like it started like this, but since my work is more branding focused, this is just to show how you can extend a visual language into posters. And if you're working on an animation and you want to build it out as a branding project, you can include like posters, billboards, and things like that. This was another variation. I wanted to try motion posters, and I used like a very simple plugin and to keep the focus still on the title and the venue, but also have some kind of moving element.
I really like the way you transition from your scenes to your scenes. Specifically, the first scene with the trumpet, it starts out as like a squiggly line, and then the three lines come
Yeah.
in. How did you come up with that? Like, was that planned, or was that something you kind of felt for while you were working?
I think for me, it's like a lot of people who do very like strict, pure animation stick to the storyboard. For me, it's more of a starting point. Like I start with it, and because animation can be intimidating and it's extremely time consuming, so it's good to know what you're going to do. But a lot of the transitions don't, at least for me, work the way I imagine it,
Oh,
and
okay.
it looks ugly. So I have to scrap that. I think it's more like on the go for me that I decide this is not working. Also, when you see something in motion, you get other ideas. So, yeah, I think that was more of an improv thing, just figuring it out on
Yeah.
the go. Like, I planned these drums, but it's not actually in the piece.
Right.
Because,
Okay,
yeah,
so I'm not crazy. That's not there.
yeah,
Okay. But right, it's an in the moment thing.
yeah. So I just made the sticks transition into the
Yeah.
having music is great. Like, I don't think if you intend to have music in your piece, it should be from the get go. Like, it's not something you can add later
Yeah.
because it's going to change the whole animation. So, even with this, I started with music, which is why the storyboard doesn't exactly fit the music because
Yeah.
I can't match it always, which is why it's helpful to be a little flexible in how you want to animate it because you also have to time it to music,
Yeah.
like where it peaks and where it kind of becomes slow.
Right.
I guess one way of also doing it could be listening to the music piece and figuring out how much of it you want to use and then make your storyboard accordingly
Yeah.
because then you know where the music like peaks or like where there's a punch and then you can introduce elements of
Right.
surprise or whatever, scale things up and
Yeah.
down. I think it takes like a lot of refining to make things look good in motion. At least that's been my
Yeah.
experience. Like, I feel like with After Effects, it's like a lifelong learning thing. You will never always know what to do.
Right.
You're always going to Google how to do a certain thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the next project that I'm going to show was the first big After Effects thing I did, and then it was this one. So this was a part of a design project that I did, I think in my junior year. So it was animating a poem to invoke curiosity about non-Latin poetry. So this is actually an Urdu poem, and I translated it to English. I found a translation, and then the idea was to get people to engage in poetry that is not in like English, and how do they view it, how do they receive it. So I also did some amount of research about whether people would be interested in looking at this kind of a piece. Um, but it kind of boils down to a story, a narrative, and then the process is similar. Like made a storyboard. One extra step was the narration of the poem itself, then adding the music and then animating it. So I started out with the translation itself and reading the poem a few times over. It's really simple in its message, so I've started listing some keywords that came to my mind, which can yield like visuals like mountains, shadow, ants, building, growing, shrinking. And these are the themes in the poem. It talks about capitalism, friendships over time, the idea of concrete jungle and how skyscrapers are kind of looming over us, and the passage of time. um, and have like once I had these things in mind, I made like a mood board of sorts. The idea was to kind of contradict from the whole concrete aspect of it. We're talking about concrete jungle, something cold, the idea of capitalism. So I wanted like the opposite feel almost to bring about some warmth. So this is more like textural, hand done. And then I made the storyboard. So the way I did this was I listed those keywords again and I drew elements that came to my mind and different ways I could show perspective since it talks about buildings, different ways of showing identity and uh, something that's unique. So I started with like a thumbprint and tried to show the transition into buildings. And then I made some style frames and thought about how I can transition from one frame to another because I think that's really important in animation, like how you move from one frame to another. I was looking at different textures, like should I be more obvious and use concrete or like have bright colors or something a little more mellow. And I think I liked the blue one with yellow dots because it's a little somber. It has it feels a little deeper, but it's also not too dull or like dark looking. Um, yeah, this is the final piece. what was easy about this project was having this structure, like a script to
Okay.
follow, which is why I feel like if you want to start out with animating something but you don't know, like music videos or lyric videos are a great starting point because you already have words and you have the sentences, and then you're just thinking about animating. If you have to come up with like a narrative of your own, I think it just adds a lot of extra time.
Yeah.
So this is a commercial project that I worked on. This was my graduation project from undergrad. This is just one part of it. So with commercial projects, you don't like once you like if you worked in a freelance situation or done internships, you would know this. Like it's really hard to work on a project end to end, like from start to finish. You'll always have like collaborators or
Yeah.
you will probably be included like mid project, which kind of happened with this one. So there was a brand language in place and I had to play with those elements to come up with a design system. um, so yeah, I wanted it to be fun, more accessible, and because the audience for this project was like young people in college, so I included motion as an element in most of the collaterals. So a little about the brand. It's called Design Impact, and it was actually a CSR initiative that recognizes design innovations for social good. So essentially, they would put out briefs for students from engineering, architecture, and like all kinds of backgrounds to work on design briefs, and they would actually fund these projects to become like bigger, like entrepreneurial
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
ventures or stuff and stuff. Yeah, that's it.
Ooh.
So this is like a short piece, but again took a lot of time to figure out. I think for this, I used sound effects instead of a music piece because it talks about social good, right? And social good has a lot of connotations attached to it already. So I feel like adding music would add certain kind of bias, like you already view it as like a philanthropic thing, or I didn't want to make it look almost patronizing, which is why I thought sound effects are more neutral and would kind of bring in that cutting edge excitement to it, which it lacks currently, or at least at the stage which it was. It's not exactly exciting, so I wanted to bring in some of that energy, which is why I used sound effects to like hold the attention. It has clues to the design system itself, like the arrows move in a certain way, they stack in a certain way. So it's not just thinking about visual design as like elements, but also motion pieces that they can build on. So a lot of times you just give them a kit of parts, like the design team, and they have to take it forward. So you have to give them enough clues to draw from. It can't be a one off piece. So here there are things which they can reuse with like different content. They can change the images, change the colors, and it would still be the same brand.
How long did this process to get here take?
I think like 4 or 5 months because it was a lot of like iterating on different visual styles, and I was also working with the client.
Yeah.
So it's not the most seamless experience.
It's slow. Working with people is always slow.
Yeah. And they didn't know what their tone of voice was. And I can't make something until I don't have the content. So it was like going back and forth on the content as well.
Yeah.
Like I was trying to come up with a language for the content and then use that to design stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So when I ask everyone to make a motion graphic in 5 weeks, I am being ridiculous because clearly it takes 4 to 5 months at least.
Yeah. But this wasn't like what I was working towards. This was one of the deliverables. Like this was to show the brand, but it wasn't like I was working towards this. Like I already had all the elements and then I put this together to show the brand.
So you weren't hired as like the motion designer,
No,
but
not
because you're also a motion artist, you incorporated that into part of the branding
Yeah.
language. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
I had to build out a case study for the studio I was working at. So I was affiliated with a studio while I was doing this project, and then I was also working with the client. And when they put up this case study on their website, I had to come up with visuals for the website.
The documentation.
Yeah, the documentation. And since we worked on this like identity system, the easiest way to show how the system works across different sub brands was to create like an animation. And I have a series of these, but this is probably one of the more relevant ones, but just showing how the identity works. So how you can stack the type and arrows and change the height of it.
Wow.
Or how. So it's really to show that it can extend horizontally and vertically, and that you can change up the words and how flexible it can be, but still look like it's part of the same brand. This was a project that I did last fall at Mica. This is just to tell you that like motion design can live beyond After Effects if that's not your jam. I think I tried After Effects for a while, and I just wanted like a quicker workflow and something different. So I used creative coding to do this. This is done on P5JS, which is an open source web editor if you guys are interested. So it was part of a project called Dailies, where we had to make 12 things, one each day over 12 days. And I wanted to have a theme, so I worked with like open-ended, nonsensical clickbait headlines. So if you read them, they don't actually make sense, but it's kind of inspired by those spoofy BuzzFeed articles that you read. You won't believe, or like, this is why you're losing, or things like that.
This is why you're wrong.
Yeah.
Click here.
So yeah, it's like a satirical take on the whole clickbait culture, and these were some of the visuals that I made. So a lot of like searching how to do random things on P5JS, and then like retrofitting it to the context that I wanted it in. I think the challenge I gave myself was to make each piece look very different, but it still kind of needs to work together as like 12 visuals. Yeah, just playing with like different typefaces, which I would probably never use, and like textures, and this one's like a noise map.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the whole series. But yeah, coding is like really fun because it's a controlled playground. You give this code some parameters and then you let it do its thing. And yeah, you don't know what you're gonna get, which is the cool thing. And sometimes like it's way beyond your expectations. So like motion design is very controlled, but coding is like you give it like some things to play with, and the code does its own thing. So that's
You're like
fun.
working not with another person, but another like brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No storyboards involved.
Did you? That's what I was going to ask. Was there planning for this
No.
aside from the concept? It was really just.
I feel like with coding, it's really hard to do something you've imagined, because you need to know a lot of code to be able to figure out, okay, that's exactly what I know. That I know exactly how to do this. I know the algorithm. Whereas I don't. I just understand code. So if I look at a piece of code, I can tell what functions they've used, and I know which parameters to change. But I don't know how to write the code itself.
Right.
Like I would use some parts, change some things, mix two sets pieces of code, but I can't write something from scratch, which is why I can't make something I can think of. So if you're okay with like a little bit of ambiguity and how it's gonna look like, then this is like a great medium to explore. There are lots of tutorials on P5JS. You can also do processing and connect it to like Arduinos and make physical things like glow and add sensors to it and stuff. Just putting it in context, like if there were
Ooh.
like a newspaper which had just like clickbait articles, how would that
I love
look?
this.
But yeah, that's it.
Wow. 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 Congratulations. This is beautiful. You did it.